Well, earnings call discussion Q1 2022. What Tesla's doing right is two things. First, and they're delivering, executing against their strategy, which is, of course, the reason why wealth is being generated in the first place. Second, they have a vision which is driving growth. They have a vision which is to deliver products and services where demand is such that they can have enough pricing power to make a profit and generate wealth. And this is really what disruptive companies fundamentally do. In other words, you cannot be a disruptive company if you don't do that. And this is an important distinction that I want to discuss a little bit more in detail in this particular episode, because there's a lot of companies out there, so-called growth companies, that we do well and then all of a sudden stop doing well. Netflix is one of them, but Netflix is probably the gold standard of such failures. There's a lot more rubbish in the market, and I want to distinguish that. I want to help people understand a little bit how we think here at Orange Capital Partners when it comes to real disruption versus fake disruption. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's April 21st, 2022. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is up 6.8%. The market's up 60 basis points. For the year, we are down 10%. The market's down 4.7%. We are underperforming by 5.3%. The main outperformance today, of course, comes from Tesla. They had their earnings call yesterday. The stock is up roughly 8%, and we attribute that to two factors. First, their numbers are exceptionally good, and second, there are growth prospects that we think the market is taking seriously. And let's just dive into this particular topic, because this is the one thing where I think Bayesian reasoning, probability, and all these discussions that we had just previously come into place, in the sense that, well, how do you deal with the fact that Elon Musk is promising you a robo-taxi or Project Optimus, which is basically a humanoid robot? And he's saying that the humanoid robot, for example, will be even bigger than, let's say, the car business. So how do you deal with these types of statements? Do you say, or this is how Wall Street deals with this. Wall Street says, well, we're just going to put a probability on this, 10%, 5%, something like that. But like we just discussed in the David Deutsch episode, where we spoke about probability and sort of the fallacy of probability, probability is just another word for omen or superstition or something like that, which of course is completely not the way we want to think about anything in this, at least not as professional investors. So how else can we think about it? Well, we can think about it as is or isn't. So is Tesla going to be a company that will create growth through humanoid robots and robotaxis, or isn't it? And in order to answer that question, the best proxy we have is, of course, what is happening today. There isn't anything else. Everything else is conjecture, superstition, like I said, things like that. So what we really have, the only thing that we're left with as investors, fundamentally, is what is actually today going on. And what's going on today is, in particular, we have a company that is delivering against its promises from the past, that has an infrastructure that is built for growth, for physical growth, kinetic growth, not just virtual growth a la software, but kinetic growth. They can actually grow volumes by 50% or more. That's what they promised us. And they can grow sales even more because they have pricing power. Let's talk about pricing power for a second. What does pricing power mean? Pricing power means that you have a product that people want bad enough so you can raise prices. That's what pricing power means. There's no such thing as raising prices because of inflation. You can only raise prices because people want your product. Now, of course, there are dynamics here. For example, if there is inflation across the board, of course you're going to raise your prices. But you have to think in terms of profits. How much of the price increase is inflation driven versus how much is demand driven? The answer is, look at the margins. If the margins expand, that means that you have a product that people want. That means you have more power over your consumers. That means you can reinvest more money into better products and even more products. And the consumer is letting you do that because they're paying a higher price than what your cost inflation is. In other words, they're paying a higher price relative to alternative products, and that way the consumer is voting with her feet, saying, I want more of that, please go reinvest your capital. This is what it means in business terms, and this is what's happening to Tesla, and this is why Tesla is a great investment right now. The question is, how is it going to be in the future? Well, like we said, the CEO is telling us that the two biggest drivers of the future will be, actually there's three, and two coming from the CEO and one from the CFO. The CEO is saying the two biggest drivers of the future growth will be Project Optimus, a humanoid robot, and there will be FSD, which is full self-drive robot taxi-driven software. And then we have the CFO also telling us, well, on top of all of that, I can also promise you that we will have more software revenue in other forms, a lot of full self-driving stuff, but probably also other services, gaming, things like that, that we have been talking about in the past. So what does all this mean? Well, again, we can't think in probabilities anymore. We've discussed that several times, so we don't want to do that. But what we can say is, look, what is today is a company that has in place a structure that can deliver against fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. So that means that we have a good chance to deliver even more fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. So the chance that the Tesla actually is something more than today is relatively high. Now, saying the chance is relatively high is just another word to say the probability is relatively high. And again, we can't think like that. We cannot have a company that is 40% going to deliver full self-driving and 60% isn't, or something like that. This is not the way we want to think. So how else can we think? And in my probability podcast, I said that, well, we want to reduce our thinking wherever we can to zeros and ones, what is and what isn't, and leave the rest out. So in that sense, can we say that there's a 99% or close to 1 probability that Tesla will deliver against Project Optimus? No, there isn't. Can we say with a very, very high chance that Tesla will deliver full self-driving robotaxis? No, we can't. But what we can say is that Tesla will deliver a new type of car that is designed for full self-driving. That's almost certainly going to happen. And the reason they haven't designed that thing yet is because I think they're not sure if there is going to be a safety driver or not. And maybe there will be a hybrid. Maybe there will be something in between where we're going to have a safety driver, maybe that drives you from downtown LA to the highway, and then the thing drives by itself from LA to San Francisco. So that's one chance, that there's one iteration that could happen here. So in other words, I think there's almost 100% chance that we will have some sort of full self-driving vehicle designed for full self-driving, but we're not sure yet if there's going to be a safety driver or not. So this is number one, very important. And this is a little bit like the iPhone. It's a little bit secret also, because some of the technology is available, some of the technology is not available, and therefore the company itself is probably still a bit in the cloud, and of course we as investors are also in the cloud. But we can say with very high likelihood, and therefore with a 1, that there will be something coming. So therefore that is not just, a pipe dream. In terms of Project Optimus, can we say with very high probability that there will be a robot doing work in the factory? I think the answer is yes. The low-hanging fruit is already pretty obvious, things like shelving stuff and taking stuff from one place to the other. So all those sort of things, in our view, are almost certainly going to happen, and they're going to solve certain problems that have been very, very big problems so far, such as, for example, the whole picking stuff that, for example, Amazon was talking about. So there is tremendous opportunity on the humanoid robot side to do away with labor that today is done by humans, and it's monotonic, boring labor. I just want to interlude here the Grapes of Wrath that I finished yesterday. And just one thing, this is not a formal review, it will come. But what the main problem is in the Grapes of Wrath is that the people who are farmers get displaced by machines. And they start doing things like picking fruit, which is not displaceable by machines. Well, this is exactly what the humanoid robot is displacing. So this is the next generation of human physical labor, which is going to be displaced by the humanoid robot. It is the dexterity-driven, difficult, more, let's say, backbending type work where you have to go up and down and left and right. So all those sort of things that humans are still doing today in warehouses at Amazon, in factories at Tesla, all those things will be driven by the humanoid robot. We believe that there's a tremendous amount of work that can be done that way, and therefore we think there's an almost 100% chance that this will happen and it will become a growth driver for Tesla. If not as a sort of AWS form, okay, let's talk about what type of business this could look like, what type of company Tesla could be in 5 years. Well, this is a huge opportunity for AWS type services. In other words, you build a robot that solves problems for yourself, which is a humongous upside for your company and your manufacturing abilities, and then you start outsourcing that robot to other manufacturing plants. This is one way this could go. Again, this is almost 100% chance. So we would put this as a 1, and therefore we believe that the 50% growth that Tesla is projecting is going to happen for the next decade. We have almost a 100% probability on that one. Therefore, it is also very, very likely. And therefore, we believe that the cost of capital of Tesla is going to be in the mid-20s to 30%, and therefore Tesla is the benchmark for cost of capital for us. And this is why this is why we have a very high conviction with this investment. So this earnings call has galvanized our thoughts around 3 things. One is, right now the company is in extremely good shape. Second, the 2 growth drivers are going to be humanoid robot and the robotaxi, so both very software driven. And third, and this is very important also, back to the second, it's software driven but kinetic. And this is an innovation that nobody else has in the marketplace. This is the great new innovation that is going to be driven. So this is the tractor of the Grapes of Wrath in the modern world, in the 21st century, the car that drives itself and the robot that picks up. So all the dexterity driven vision and dexterity combinations that humans are very good at today will be replaced by robots in the next 5 to 10 years, and Tesla will be the driver. And third, I think the most important thing in this call, and this is the most important thing in any kind of investment, always, is the following. We believe that the only way to survive as a growth company is to continuously, relentlessly drive growth, because that is the only way you can distinguish yourself from a competition. And the way you drive growth is by implementing, instantiating fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. And this is exactly what companies like Netflix have not done. And to finish this episode, I just want to distinguish Tesla to these types of companies, let's say Netflix. I've done that yesterday, but I want to do it today in a more general way. So what I want to say is the following. There's a lot of companies in the market, they go IPO, startups, and they have growth, but they don't have a product that people are willing to pay more than the cost. In other words, they don't have a profit. And when you don't have a profit, then you can't continuously deliver your product and reinvest the money in better investments and so on and so forth. This is one of the problems. But not having a profit is, of course, being dismissed as often, well, there is this, there is that. We can grow without profit, and then at some point corner the market. For example, in Mao-Shi Sun's strategies with Uber and DoorDash and companies like that has been to just, let's say, try to grow somehow, become big, and then when you're that big, corner the market and make money and things like that. That doesn't work, not because it's bad and predatory. It's because you don't have a fundamentally new concept engineering practice under your belt, or you don't have a culture of creating that type of growth. And when you don't have a culture of creating that type of growth, eventually you will be caught up by competition. So if you don't have that relentless drive to continuously renew yourself, to continuously drive innovation, you will be caught up. And this is what happened to Netflix. Netflix went to Hollywood, wanted to change Hollywood. Well, guess what? Hollywood changed Netflix. And a lot of times, let's say Uber wanted to change the cabs driving industry. Well, the cab driving industry changed Uber. Basically, Uber became just a glorified cab service. So a lot of times when you just go somewhere and you try to impose your technology on an existing industry, you get changed by that industry. When the tractors changed the way farming is done in Oklahoma, Oklahoma didn't change the tractors. The tractors survived because they were fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices, which much better cost structures, risk rewards, returns, and all of that stuff. And this is just a metaphor, of course, of what Tesla is doing today. So to summarize, the earnings call for Q1 2022 was a success in many ways. Of course, the numbers were phenomenal, but more importantly, the company is setting out a growth path, which we believe has very high likelihood to succeed. Therefore, it is in the realm of it is versus it is probable. So it is going to happen. We think that, therefore, we can conveniently, with high conviction, put a growth target of at least 50% on the stock for the next 5 to 10 years. And we can therefore assume that the cost of capital of Tesla will be at least in the mid-20s, if not 30%. In other words, that's what the IRR of the company is expected to be. And this is, of course, a very satisfactory return for us. And that's why we have a very high conviction in the stock. Thank you.